Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Child Psych Podcast. My name is Tammy Shmoon. I am a registered psychologist, a registered play therapist, and a mom to three amazing kids. And today it's Tania Johnson and myself, my co-host to the Child Psych Podcast. And we're going to be talking to you about parental self-care. And this is an area that Tania is really passionate about.
Hello, everyone. Such a pleasure to be chatting about this topic today. It's something that I believe deeply in. I think so often the focus is on our children instead of on our own well-being, and I deeply, deeply believe that we cannot look after our kiddos if we're not looking after ourselves.
Yeah, we have this kind of a metaphor we give parents, whether we're teaching like a course on discipline or emotion regulation for kids. And today we're basically talking about emotion regulation for parents. And that's this idea, like you're on a plane, right? And you're on your way to, say, Mexico or someplace nice. And all of a sudden there's a little bit of shaking and the captain comes on and he lets you know that there's some turbulence coming. Now, you could have two very different experiences of this flight. And the first could be a captain that is like, he's kind of shaky in his voice and he goes, well, everyone, there's some turbulence coming and I'm a little nervous about this. It's only my, 10th flight down to Mexico, and bear with me here. I'll try to get you through this. And, you're then terrified, being like, I don't know if this guy can land this plane. Like, what if it's bigger than I think it is? Versus the, whether it's the stewardess or the assistant or the captain coming on over the overhead speakers. And he calmly says, I don't want anyone to worry. We're going to experience some minor turbulence, but we're going to get you to your destination. You have nothing to worry about. Let the stewardess know if you need some extra water or use the bathroom if you need to. And there's just this calm, I've got it. And everyone says, okay, so they're expecting some turbulence, a little bit of stress, but ultimately you feel that the person who's in charge of you is 100% capable of getting you to the destination. And so as a pilot, as a parent who is flying this aircraft to the destination, it's not that you're going to have every single answer, but there's a certain element of faking it till you make it and making sure that you are resourced enough to at least summon that voice of being like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get us there. I can handle this. And so that child doesn't feel like they're too much, their emotions are too much, that parent doesn't know what the heck they're doing.
Yeah. I love that analogy so much, because I think so often as parents we go, what's wrong with this kid? Why is this kid yelling at me? Or why is this kid completely all over the place and so messy? When we are messy, we are yelling, we're having a hard time ourselves. And we know that our ability to calm ourselves, like that calm pilot that you're talking about there, our ability to calm ourselves has to happen before a child can start to self-regulate. And I feel like that's often a step that we forget. So if we go, you know what, I need to be able to recognize the stress response in my body. I need to be able to calm that stress response and then move forward in a way that's healing for my family. If I can recognize that first, I believe that that's almost 50% of the battle when our children are struggling. It starts with the parent first, and then it goes to the kiddo. But so often the focus is on the child. And one of the other things that we often say at the Institute is, it's just like in the airplane again, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on your kiddo. We cannot help them if we're running on empty. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to be resourced. And let us be really clear. That does not mean you're not going to screw up. You're going to screw up over and over and over. You're human. And everyone is learning how to become a parent, just like your child is figuring out life. And you have to have some grace for yourself and your child. And if we go beating ourselves up every single time we mess up, actually that's going to make our behavior worse. Like it's going to, we're going to see an exacerbation of shame and a negative self-talk, which then makes us less patient with our kids. And yeah.
And I think the big thing here is that kids don't need perfect parents. They need messy, imperfect human beings who are able to be reflective and go, whoa, what just happened today? That was not okay. To make repairs, we need to make repairs. And then to go, how do we actually shift things? They need us to be who we are. They need us to be messy, but they also need us to be deeply reflective, to say things can change. And this is how we change patterns in families and actually over generations of families.
Yeah, there was we did our interview recently. I don't think it might have been for our podcast, but I think it was for a conference. And I remember taking in this information when I was studying as a facilitator with Circle of Security. And there was a huge study done, and I can't quote it right now, but I do know it's a study because I looked it up. And it is, you only need to get it right 30% of the time. They call it the good enough parenting study. 30% of the time. Now, I don't think you should be abusing your kids the other 70% of the time. But it means you don't have to get it right all the time. Is to take like kind of the pressure off. It's only 30%.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge, huge, huge. Okay. So I think one of the issues sometimes when we talk about self-care is that it's become this commercialized word that often parents end up laden with even more guilt. It's another thing that I'm failing at. I'm not getting to my hot yoga class, or I'm not taking those walks, so I'm not journaling every morning like I said I would. And so I think part of looking after ourselves is really sitting down, each and every parent, and reflecting on, when I'm truly being compassionate with myself, what does that mean? What does it look like for me? And that's going to be different for different people. For some people, it might be, with compassion for myself is being really organized in different areas of my life. Compassion for myself is putting up boundaries. Compassion for myself is making sure that I do have 30 minutes of quiet time each day, whether that's before the kids wake up or whatever it is. I think that we have to re-look at what we think self-care is and really come down to, on an individual basis, what does it mean when I'm truly looking after myself?
Yeah, I think when I originally thought of self-care, I was like, oh, I went and get a massage, or I go to a spa, or I get a pedicure. And I know our listeners are going to hear it's more holistic than that. It's not a cliche. I mean, that can be part of it. Don't get me wrong. Getting a massage is great, or having a bubble bath, like that's wonderful. But it involves a bit of a change in lifestyle and perspective when it comes to like implementing this, and at all kind of different levels.
Yeah, so let's start with that. So today, as we talk about self-care, we're actually going to use a model that we refer to all of the time at the Institute. It's the 3R model by Dr. Bruce Perry. It talks about really looking at wellness and emotion regulation from the bottom of the brain up. So really looking at what we do with our stress response, how we connect with others, and then also how we problem solve and move through our world with a different perspective. So we're going to look at self-care from that perspective today. I deeply believe that self-care starts with figuring out, where is there stress in my world that feels like it's out of control, like it's never ending, like it's creating a toxic toll on my body. And so when I work with parents, I always say to them, there are going to be some stresses in your life that are there, that are manageable, that they're controllable. What are things that feel really big? When you think of it, it kind of stops your heart a little bit. And I get them to write it down on a piece of paper. It might be work demands that never end. It might be a relationship that feels as if it cuts into my soul. So I get them to write down, what are the stresses in your world? Let's have a look at those stresses. And then let's talk about what we actually want to do with those stresses, because we know that when our body is in a constant state of fight, flight, freeze, or collapse, that it's very, very, very difficult to be able to engage in our world in a purposeful way. And so often we don't actually take a list, and so often we don't actually look at where is my energy, where's my life energy basically being taken away from me. So I always start with those stresses. Let's talk about what's in your control. Let's talk about what's outside of your control.
Beautiful. And some of these are simple things, and some of them are heartbreaking things that we have to change. Like maybe it's saying, I don't have enough time with my kids because my job is so demanding. I need to think about taking maybe a little less money and then spending more time with my family. There's some big ones. Maybe it's a friendship you've had for 25 years that you're like, it is toxic and it takes a toll on me. This person doesn't honor my boundaries, or I don't feel seen or heard in this relationship. And some of them might be just small things, being like, I need to make sure I'm getting enough nutrients into my body in a day. I need to drink some more water. Like, I am constantly feeling kind of gross in my body, and I have to make some small changes there that can actually lead to pretty big changes in terms of your mood.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. One of the this fascinating study across the United States where they took a whole group of teachers and they asked teachers where they were in terms of burnout. And those teachers that reported the highest level of burnout, they found that the students in those teachers' classrooms actually had the highest level of cortisol in their saliva. And so we had teachers with high levels of burnout, students with high levels of cortisol. So of course the question is which came first. So really stressed students, really stressed teacher. But it's this beautiful example of how our stress levels really dance with one another. And so again, this is why I'm saying to parents, it's really important to figure out where those stresses are. And as Tammy said, it might be something really big, or it might also just be that you're depleted and not looking after those foundational blocks of wellness like sleep, hydration, nutrition, movement.
Yeah. Well, let's look at that model. And many of you have heard our podcast. We've used this model in terms of emotion regulation for kids. I think I did an episode on that, the 3 R's. So how do we apply these 3 kind of layers of the brain, 3 levels, 3, like we call them floors of the house, to parental self-care?
Yeah, so that first level would be our ability to regulate. So I think the very first thing that I would look at there is I would literally write down sleep, hydration, nutrition, movement. Take a minute and reflect on where am I with each one of these? How is my sleep? As an example, what's one small thing that I can change? And it's about micro shifts. Micro shifts lead to wellness. So what's one small thing I can change about my sleep? Is it one small thing that I need to change about movement? Is it that for every hour of work, I'm going to get up and move my body for 10 minutes? Just small little shifts. What are small little shifts that I can make there? So I would start with those foundational blocks of wellness. And then I would look at those stresses and go, okay, what is something that I can shift in terms of stresses in my world? What's in my control to shift and what is outside of my control? But little shifts again lead to big tides of wellness.
Yeah. So when it comes to the importance of like sleep and diet, I think like we're told we don't sleep enough. And I know I've had nights where I sit there and I stare at the clock and I'm like, I need to get 8 hours of sleep. And now I'm like, but now I'm only getting 7.5 hours of sleep. And now it's 7 hours of sleep. And then we get more stressed out because we're not getting enough sleep. And then we assume like diet. We're like, oh God, like I have to eat vegan or I have to eat this. Like, I guess what are like a couple maybe strategies for or understanding how we get to sleep a little sooner, or maybe even like understanding a little bit how diet plays into mental health, and maybe just like some little changes we could make to make that manageable.
So little changes, and again, every person's going to be a little bit different here, but little changes in our house at least often has to do around, for example, technology. So at least an hour before bedtime, not looking at screens. In our house, a shift that we made was that we took phones out of the bedroom and we now charge them on a power bank in the kitchen, because if they're out of sight, it's out of mind. Way more likely to read a book if my phone is actually in the kitchen instead of next to my bed as an alarm clock. For Christmas last year, I asked for an alarm clock so that I could actually have an alarm clock that went off in the morning instead of relying on my phone, because it's way too easy to say I need my phone as an alarm clock. So little things where we go, you know what, I'm not focusing on the amount of sleep. I'm not going, I have to get 8 hours of sleep, because as Tammy said, that's just stressful. To me, it's what is in my control. I can't control that I'm actually going to get 8 hours, especially with little ones in the house. What I can control is the things that I know make my sleep better, like removing tech from the bedroom, not looking at tech an hour before bedtime, having a hot bath. So we know that a hot bath before bed helps to cool your body, which then makes your body more ready for sleep. So there's little things that I can go, actually, I know. And I think most people do intrinsically know where their patterns are not as healthy as they could be. So it's one little shift. It's not too many. So that was sleep. With diet, it's looking and going, you know what? As often as parents, we might be racing through the day and not actually having 3 meals with little snacks in between. So it's going, I am going to promise myself that I'm going to make sure that I have my breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then healthy snacks in between, cutting back on sugar. So we know that sugar, as far as mental health goes, can be quite toxic. So actually, I want to just get my sugar from natural sources like fruit. And then water, when we're dehydrated, we're more likely to actually flip into that stress response. So making sure that we're just hydrating and drinking throughout the day. So I always say little shifts are incredible in terms of wellness.
Yeah. And everyone, when we look at, I know we've done a couple episodes on this, but your 95% of your serotonin, guys, comes from what you eat. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's involved in your emotion regulation and your sleep and your diet. So when our guts are really unhealthy, what's going to happen is we're not going to have enough serotonin, which is going to either make us want to sleep too much, or we're going to struggle with sleep, and we're going to have a hard time kind of keeping our lid on when it comes to our emotions. Like, we're more prone to anxiety and depression. And I know, as a busy parent, one of the things I've had to learn is that I often can't get enough healthy food into my body. So I've had to just add supplements, like making sure that certain dietary pieces are being added, like with adding, I add fiber to my coffee in the morning. I take a probiotic. I make sure, because fiber is really important for mental health and building serotonin, your vitamin C and D and B12 and B6, like these are the hallmarks for creating a healthy gut so your brain can produce enough of this chemical. So, we really encourage you to look at some of that. Even if you can't eat all the healthy food, like just get some nutrients into your stomach.
Yeah. And we know too that, I don't want us to forget about movement either, that 20 to 30 minutes of low cardio has been shown to really reduce the stress response in the body. And some studies show that it can be almost as effective as an antidepressant. So making sure that we're moving our body, often not too close to bedtime, but really just going for a walk can do wonderful things in terms of helping to settle that stress response in the body.
Yeah. I know I started just doing it with my kids. That's how I fit it in. We had to do it with our kids, like after dinner. That's
Yep.
how fit it in.
Yep. I love it. So really, we're looking after that stress response first, which is the first floor, the bottom part of the brain. The next part of the brain that we need to look after is the limbic part of the brain, which is all about relating. It's all about connections. And here, this is about really being aware, as Tammy had mentioned earlier about relationships, so being aware of which relationships fill your cup and which relationships drain you. What helps to make you feel safe? Where do you feel unsafe? Really starting to listen to your body, the signals that your body gives you about where you truly belong with other people. And so when I work with clients, I'll often say to them, let's do an inventory together. And we create 3 circles. In the middle circle, I say, let's write people who bring you joy. Who brings you joy? And then in the next circle, we write, who are people who I like to hang out with from time to time? And then in the third circle, people that I need to create boundaries with. And then we write down who those people are and we look at what is needed in each one of those circles. How do I spend more time with the people that bring me joy? And then in that outer circle, what are kind, compassionate ways that I can put in boundaries so that I'm not feeling as if my cup is drained constantly?
Yeah. I think giving permission to prioritize your adult relationships is a huge a blockade for a lot of parents. We're taught, at least in North American culture, that we're very child centric, like everything has to revolve around our kids. And then we deprioritize intimacy in our marriages or our friendships or our spouses, whatever kind of relationship we're in. When I always say, our kids are learning to be happy by watching us, and that we're modeling that process. So your relationships with whoever it is who's your part of your village has to be important. It has to be. And that means it's okay to get a babysitter. It's okay to give your kids to their, I thought Friday, like we did that. We sent our kids to their friends' houses and we just told those parents we need a night. And it's so, and and then we're willing to do that with their kids. Do you need a night? Haul them to our house. Like,
But if we never do it, how do our children ever learn this model of self-care? How do they ever go, this is something that's important if they've never seen it lived in their families?
yeah, no, that's a hard one. But again, we have to say it's okay. It's okay to put your needs in the forefront. Like, it's not that we don't meet our kids' needs, but understand, for you to be at capacity that you even have anything to give them means you have to honor that relationship, I guess, you have with yourself.
Yeah. And Tammy, this part of the brain to the limbic system, so it's relationship and it's also emotions. So what comes up for me here too is parents really starting to sit with, what emotions do I feel comfortable with? Which ones do I feel uncomfortable with? Why do I feel uncomfortable with those feelings? And then what I want to do with it. So part of this to me is a little bit of self-work too. And so for me, I know that I actually am able to go to the harder parts of my world. I'm really able to think about feelings when I'm in water, when I'm swimming. So I'll think about my own childhood. How did I respond? How was I responded to when I was angry versus how do I respond to my kids now when they're angry? But I think that self-work has to happen as part of self-care, because then we understand ourselves better. We understand the child inside us better, as well as the child in front of us better when our own kiddos are struggling.
Yeah. Kids have a lovely way of triggering us, especially whatever age your child is at. I've actually noticed it's been very interesting in my own house. Like my middle child, the age that she's at is when I actually struggled a lot. And I've noticed my patience is a lot shorter with her right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain element of reflection that comes with that. And you need some time on your own to do some of that reflection though. Like
Mm-hmm.
there is an element of taking some time and stepping back. And then for me, it's not just reflecting, but I have to share that. For me, it was my husband or my mom that I'll like
Mm-hmm.
share that I'm struggling with this and it's really hard and I feel really triggered by certain things. And they don't need to fix it for me, but there is an element for me of needing to air it out. And then
Yep.
it's like, okay, I think I'm good now. I just needed to say that thing.
Totally. And I think part of this too is about really role modeling, being vulnerable and being authentic. And so when we can go, hold on, what's hard for me? What am I struggling with? Our children are more likely again to be able to do that reflective work themselves one day. And it can be with a therapist, it can be with a husband, it can be in your journal. But it's finding that space to really look at the places where we may feel a little bit more triggered in our own journeys.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's so many parents, I think, when they think of airing out their baggage, they say like, "Oh, I can't afford a therapist. Like, I can't do that. I don't have the time." And it can be enough to journal it, to talk to your spouse, to talk to your friend, like someone who's non-judgmental and just can hold space for that. So we just want to say that, yeah, there's nothing wrong. Go see a therapist if that's going to help.
Yeah.
But someone's got to walk. You need someone to walk alongside you. Like we're not meant to do that by ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Brene Brown's got such a beautiful parenting manifesto, and she talks about just the power of being authentic and vulnerable and courageous with our kiddos. And I think that that's what comes up for me as we talk about really doing some of your own work so that you can be the parent that you want to be and the person that you want to be in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've looked at stresses and relationship and feelings. And then the last part of it really is our reasoning ability, which comes to our prefrontal cortex, the upper parts of the brain, where we plan, prioritize, regulate all of those feelings coming up from that limbic system, where we can develop our own passions and gifts. This part, I think, particularly in those early parenting years, I feel like this part of the brain gets a little bit forgotten about as we're kind of lost in diapers and feeding and trying to balance a million different things. But I think as our children mature a little bit and as we start to ground ourselves and anchor ourselves into that parenting journey, it's really important to go, who am I? What do I want out of my world? Where do I want to still grow? Because when we're growing as human beings, again, our kids are more likely to continue growing throughout their lifespan. So they look and they go, whoa, mom's really passionate about dot, dot, dot. Or mom spends time on a Tuesday night going to go and do pottery or to paint because this is something that really fills her. That's so important to be living not only for ourselves, but for our children too, so that they one day will go, okay, how do I continue throughout my lifespan to grow and to be my own human being who's anchored into my passion and my gifts?
Yeah, and again, it's one of the things I've had to learn, and Alan and my husband and I talk about this a lot, is that we take time away from our kids to go do the things we love. And for us, we have grandparents who can come and help out once in a while. And like I do book club once a month and I have horses. So those are like the two things I really love. I love reading and I love animals. And sometimes I can bring my kids into that and sometimes I can't. But there's just this permission I have to give myself sometimes. I'm like, no, I can go to this book club once a month. Like the kids, so my mom can put the kids to bed or Alan can put the kids to bed. It's okay. And then the kids sometimes don't want me to go. And I said, no, it's really important that everybody in this family has something that they love. and everybody has something, and we'll have talks about what that is. And so it's just a reminder that everyone has time that they get to do their thing, moms, dads, and kids.
Yeah. And I think, if you don't have a village around you, because I think so many people don't have a village, it's about how do we make this happen in this household? How do we create space where everybody can really figure out and really have time to be with their gifts and what they love to do? Part of me as the girls, I've got 2 little girls, as the girls have gotten a little bit older, part of really accessing that prefrontal cortex part of my brain has really been about sharing identity with them. So sharing, I'm South African living in Canada, so sharing my history with them, sharing my stories with them, sharing a different cultural perspective with them. And to me, that the beauty of being able to tell stories, share stories, and really go, this is who your mom is one of the greatest gifts of being a mother. You get to continue on stories. And they're shared at developmentally appropriate times, but that has been a huge part of accessing and letting my girls know who I am as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good reminder too, Tan, for me, like thinking back on what I said about, like, obviously I have a village and I'm very lucky and very fortunate that I have that. But sometimes we don't, and we have to make do with the hands that we've been dealt. Like, I know you don't have as much support as I've had that way, and you guys have had to work your way around that and find ways to be creative about giving yourself that space. And I know you get up really early, and that's part of it. For that reason, I wonder if that's how you cultivate.
It totally is. It totally is. This morning, it's Monday morning that we're recording. I woke up this morning and I was like, I don't want to get up. And I was like, oh, but if I wait any longer, the girls are going to be up soon. So I was up and at it really early this morning.
Yeah, and that was something I learned very early, like years and years ago, was I get up an hour before my kids and I meditate, or sometimes I can't meditate because my brain is just chattering too much. So let's be honest, sometimes it's not meditation. Sometimes it's sitting there just drinking my coffee in the dark.
Totally. I hear you. That's me. Yeah, so I think the big message that I want to give parents is what we've been sold as self-care isn't often actually self-care. Yes, the occasional massage is great. Yes, the occasional class is amazing. But I think sitting down and going, what fills me is more important. What helps me to bring down that stress response, focus on important relationships, helps me to be reflective, and then also helps me to really be the person that I want to be in the world, helps me to live my passions, to really live my identity. I believe that that is truly self-care. And I also deeply believe that it has to be in that order. So stress, connection and feelings, and then identity and passions. I believe that if we work with it in that order, that is true self-care.
Yeah. And what Tania's saying is we start at the bottom and work our way up. So don't worry about the other 2 floors of the brain, that limbic system, that prefrontal cortex. Like, if all you can do is just really maybe like work on your sleep and work on like maybe adding some vitamins to your diet, like that's a
Start
win.
there.
Start there and like get that under control, and then say, okay, like my body is feeling healthy. I feel safe in my body. Like I feel like I have a little bit of energy. Now I'm going to start looking at like my relationships. But if you tackle all of these at once, you will just like I give up. Like you're just going to wash your hands, because it's too much to ask to make that many changes all at once.
Small changes. So anybody listening in, if this is resonating with you, I would actually just create a little chart for yourself. So how do I help my body to feel safe? Then how do I work on connections? And then how do I work on identity? But start with that safety in your body first. That is huge. And then we slowly work up, because as you feel more safe, it's going to feel more natural to go, where are my connections? How do I work on myself? But you have to start with the safety in the body first. Work with it in that order.
Beautiful. I think it's a great model. And then Tania has a more comprehensive course on this, on is it navigating parental stress, right?
Yes.
That's the title. Yeah. And if you go to the URL that's it's embedded in the description of this podcast, you can take 30% off. You'll see the coupon code there. You'll see the URL. Tan, is there a couple more things you want to say about this course? Like what's in it?
Yeah. So basically what we've looked at today, it's in far more detail, and it actually looks at, for example, each one of the building blocks that we've spoken about. So it's really looking at the bottom part of the brain, and then sleep, movement, nutrition, recognizing stress response in your body. Then it's looking at the second part of the brain, second floor, and really delineating each little thing and the concrete tools and strategies that we can do to create shifts in our world. And then it looks at their prefrontal cortex and then helps us to recognize, how do I start to hone in on who I want to be in the world? Because I think so many parents forget that in the chaos of parenting. So what I love about that course is that it's really, really concrete. There's tons of strategies. And I think parents walk out going, I have a plan. I know what I want to do next.
Oh, I love that. So yeah, everyone just go to the podcast description. You can take that as part of our membership or just a standalone course. But it's something we often gift people actually as when they attend our live events, because we think it's so pivotal that our parents are putting the oxygen masks on themselves first, actually before their child, so they are emotionally available to their kids. So yeah, just take a look if that's something that you're wanting a little more assistance with.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. As a final note, I hope that everybody goes and does one thing for themselves today.
Beautiful. I'm going to go ride my horse today.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody.